Hello, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday, where I'm at. This is a holiday. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. And I am Dee, and I forgot that part of my intro. Wow, it really is kind of a new day, isn't it? So, welcome to Catalyst Energies. This is actually the report that I tried to do on Friday. I don't know what I was thinking, that I was going to try to cram it all in before the weekend after the lead up and having Thanksgiving Day and everything that entails. So I did try, and it would have been so long of a report that I was just like, no, I can spend some time to really condense this. And in reality, it feels like that we just needed the time to go through the weekend and actually kind of feel things out on our own, and then we can come back and do this retrospective because we are leading up to the next eclipse. So this is what this report's really going to focus on, is the major themes moving into the eclipse and finishing out this Scorpio lunar cycle. There are major transits that are going to be so much fire in the chart that we're going to go into that, and then we'll go through all of the signs and look at the areas that these major events and themes are going to be taking place, and hopefully we can all get a little bit of clarity as our perspective may be shifting, or we are seeing things from a whole new perspective in general, or just to even validate what we've been feeling. It's really very useful at times for the astrological themes and the symbols that represent all of the players when they come together and they have this specific narrative structure, and then you're like, wow, that's exactly how I'm feeling in my life. And I find astrology in that retrospective fashion to be very useful as well. So that's what we're going to do today. So welcome back, everyone. And to those of you who acknowledged and wished me a happy birthday, thank you so much. I actually really do appreciate that very much. Not a milestone year, but still, I got to do exactly what I wanted, which was nothing. Sleep in front of the fireplace and read and eat food that other people prepare for me and give to me. So thank you. And that's another reason why just Friday came and it just swept through, and I was like, there's just no way that this is going to happen. So welcome. And if this is your first time here, thanks for stopping by. We're going to go through the weekly astrology. This usually happens on Fridays, and we go through the weekend together, and then we break it down per sign. But you know, it was a holiday weekend here in the US, and regardless of how you feel about the meaning behind it, it's still had a lot of people traveling and preparing large meals and getting together, and maybe some stress, maybe some anxiety, maybe just exhaustion, because that's definitely how I felt. And we had a moon in Leo over Thanksgiving, so maybe a lot of very combust feelings and a need to really express oneself very strongly. But hopefully that was in a way that was able to be all brought together harmoniously. It's not always like that with family holidays, but I think too, the times that we are in, it's really bringing us to an awareness of what really is valuable. So Venus in Capricorn is really, really assisting this. So I'm going to exit out of studio mode here. I'm going to check in with the stream and see how it's going. Yes, good morning to you, Sunshine. I just miss everybody interacting. So, I would say I miss your face too, but I don't see it as often as you're seeing mine. So we have a different experience of that. So, so great to have everybody here. So, and it doesn't matter how much coffee I seem to drink. It's still just really mellow over here. It snowed for the first time this season, at least where I'm at. And today is the first Monday of deer season. So it's also a holiday for many of the people in the area of rural Pennsylvania. The kids don't have school today. A lot of people have off of work so they can go hunting, right? This is a big part of my local culture. So, but I was up at 5, ready to go. And, but it's like, the body is not quite ready to engage back into the routine of life. So, but we're going to try to kickstart anyway, because that's what we need to do. Because if we don't, most assuredly, it will be kickstarted for us. And let's take a look. So what we're going to do is kind of go over let me pull up a chart for just what's happening right now, and then we will do all of the signs. And there will be a very handy glyph here in the bottom left corner if you want to go back and listen per sign. This is for rising sign, of course, is the prime, and then your moon sign, and then your sun sign. So there's going to be something there for everybody in terms of where you have strong resonance. But in terms of very specific house placements, we're going to be going from your rising sign. And of course, this is whole sign astrology. So if you use a house cusp system and your houses are designated by a specific degree, and sometimes it doesn't align with what the generalized or the whole sign astrology relates to, you have to be a little bit more willing to figure out who and what area is being spoken for. So this is how we learned the language. It's certainly how I learned it. I taught myself astrology by listening to other astrologers and casting charts every day and consuming it and immersing it into my life, into it like a language. That's how I learned it. There's no real easy answer, not to be completely intuitive about it. So here we go. What do we have here? So today's the 29th. Two things are happening today. One we knew, which was the beginning of the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. But something that happened like 20 minutes ago, at least being presented in the mainstream news, is that Jack Dorsey stepped down from Twitter. So these are two very substantial nodal points along the fractal geometry of existence that's unfolding, that we're all part of. But this is a big one. So when we go back and start to look at leading up to today and what to expect through the rest of the week, we can see for sure that today has a lot of nodal axis type of energy, right? Like big powerhouse type of connection. So, and I'm looking at the chart. That's why I'm making all these hand motions and stuff. Man, here we go. We're going to look at today's chart. So how is everyone? I will say that when we did the reading on Wednesday, if you remember that, let's see here. There we go. Yes. If we did the reading on Wednesday, if you remember our outcome card being the Princess of Wands, but reversed, and I had mentioned about being a petulant child, or feeling like it, because what we have done is the wheel has shifted for sure, and we put that into place by the results of our own action and our own alchemical process as conscious humans and as star seeds and light workers and just people that are ready to take the reins of their own existence. So something did shift, and it was initiated by us, and where it lands was not exactly going to be very comfortable, and we're going through that right now. There's a lot of Chiron connection this week. There was a Mercury Cazimi, right? Mercury and the Sun came into a direct conjunction yesterday in Sagittarius that we're going to talk about. We have Antares that is in trine to Chiron, so that means that Sun and Mercury are going to both conjunct with Antares, the heart of the Scorpion, and also trine Chiron as well this week. And then we have Neptune stationing direct on the 1st of December. The fog of war is going to get very thick, my friends. It's going to get very powerful, and it's going to sweep a lot of people away into oblivion, okay? And it's going to be really important that we allow as much of the fire into this process as we possibly can. It's setting us up in the astrology in terms of all of the fire of Sagittarius, meeting with Chiron and Aries, having Antares be part of the process as well. So that means Antarian starseeds are going to probably feel very activated on their mission. And of course, too, the heart of the Scorpion is bringing us back to, well, our Scorpio new moon, which is also what we are finishing up, that lunar cycle. So we're going to have the moon come through Libra today and tomorrow, come into Scorpio this week, and kind of give us a review period or a reflection back to the new moon that had us, are we ready to like go into the lab of our soul and really start putting some things together and really being willing to go into the unfamiliar territory. So Mars is in trine to Neptune today. Okay, this is the last real push in this water trine that has really given people voice and a sense of their own empowerment to stand up in their voice and in their expression, with Sun and Mercury coming beforehand to really say no and make a conscious decision to align with the inner integrity and the inner empowerment, and make a pretty clear declaration of where one's energy was going to be placed. And so with Mars here too, now in Scorpio, very forceful and very powerful here, we have this last big push, right, from Mars to initiate some action around our voice. So saying no, standing up, obeying our conscience, and resisting orders of an authoritarian rule, and being anchored in almost. And as much as you can anchor into Neptune and Pisces, you really can't at all. But it's such a strong, powerful life force of water. These two trines here, having to do with our ability to trust what is coming, and our ability to trust in ourselves and trust in our connection to something much, much bigger than what we think we are interacting with, and in a way that is we're presided over, and there's a sense of guardianship in a larger transcendental context, and we are just like little children, right? Like, I'm gonna pet the lamb, and the lamb is soft, and its wool is soft, and it feels good, and this is a representation of hope and newness and freshness and a cycle turning over, which eventually will happen when Neptune comes into Aries in a few years. Now it's right here is setting the stage for us to find our feeling, and the feeling is somehow rooted in, or it's like a river flowing into the ocean, but there's a very forceful current with Mars involved, right? Of just like, I know where I'm going, and I don't care what. It's almost like like a flooding almost, but it's going out to a place where it'll disperse and be one with everything else. So there is a sense of power and trust that's coming from this trine today. Also, too, depending on who you're aligned with, you'll be saying no, and trusting what's coming for you in terms of a spiritual experience. So also too, with this Maxwell trial starting today, this is like the force of our own initiative, and the warrior, right, that really acts on bravery and courage, and Mars is the god of war, but it's really represents our initiatory action to act on our own behalf, and to do it without really thinking about it, because it is the spark of within us, the spark of life within us. It's like the flash, right? And so a warrior needs that. So this is also when you bring Mars into the Scorpio realm, then you find yourself in more of a soldier's position, right? And so the soldiers, the digital soldiers, the people on the front lines of this process, the heroes that are meant to go forward into the unknown in order to discover something, and discover power. And what that means, that with Mars here, this is what we're looking at, and it is heroic, and it's really going to push. And I think that you can see, if you can see how the beginning of this trial really shows that there is some sort of momentum and behind this hero, or this hero archetype that's going into the realms of power and standing firm in his integrity, despite what is surrounding the warrior at the same time. So I don't know. There's either way, when we look at the astrology charts, we're going to see exactly what areas this may be unfolding for you. But we have, so that's today. And then in through the week, like I said, Neptune is going to station direct. And this is where it's going to get really confusing again and start to become very, very powerful. And with the Antarian stars, the Antarian trines to Chiron, we actually got set up for this when Saturn was in a direct sextile. So this is still happening, this sextile. So between Saturn and Aquarius and Chiron. And that was happening around Thanksgiving Day, or the day of the third quarter moon, which was in Virgo. So you see our moon is in Libra right now, thankfully. I'm pretty stoked on that at this moment. the moon moving through Virgo, squaring the sun. How was that for people? How did you feel when it came to the ability to control your own energetics in relation to having to think about everybody else? Especially when you're talking about like that family event type of weekend. And Sagittarius really is about the meaning of what that holds us all together, the understanding of the big picture. And there tends to be a focus on the group, especially that degree of Sagittarius, focus on the group and the needs of the group as opposed to the individual, which would be Gemini. But feeling like, well, I have to take some personal responsibility for my energy, and I have to be able to know what it feels like. I have to be able to know the difference between me and other people, while at the same time really feeling a strong compulsion to act in accordance with, we're all in this together, let's work together. And that's great. The moon, even though I think it was really difficult on some levels at this third quarter moon, really did remind us this one last time, like how important our own energetic hygiene really is when it comes to what we add to the group dynamic and what it ultimately creates. And that comes with Capricorn, the shifting into Capricorn. So the moon is going to move through Scorpio by the end of the week, and then our eclipse is going to be December 4th. So I want to go through all the transits each sign. So let's move on to that. And it'll just be quick. It'll be like, bam, this is the houses that these major transits were happening in. And let's kind of get an idea of where to look. So I wanted to, well, now I'm looking at the chat. Yay. I'm ready to light some fires. Dude, they will be lit. I promise. There's no way around it. The best thing to do is just just surrender to it and let them be lit. Otherwise it's going to be a problem. So I thought we could start with Virgo, since we did have the third quarter square. And let's be honest here, Virgo has been getting the brunt of it as far as I can tell. Virgo rising, Virgo moon, and definitely Virgo sun, but definitely Virgo rising in terms of the areas of life that you're finding yourself in. So we're going to start first, just a quick recap, Virgo, right? So Virgo ascendant right here. This is as of the 26th. This was Friday. And just to give you an idea of where you're going to find these things. So remember that the full moon lunar eclipse was in your third and ninth house, Virgo, which means the sun was in the third house, the mind and knowledge, the function of your nervous system, your immediate environment. And then the eclipsed moon was in your ninth house, along with Uranus. And so belief systems are really changing a lot for Virgo. There's no stability in terms of the big picture and what to expect. Right now, this is happening a lot within yourself with Uranus retrograde. And with the eclipse full moon, it was very difficult to see what needed to be released in order to grow into the next mature phase. And this probably won't really start to become obvious to anybody until Uranus really does station direct later. So, and of course we have the 6-month eclipse cycle. So mind and higher mind was the beginning of this eclipse cycle for Virgo. So when we bring in, first of all, there was during the Leo moon, which again was on the 26th, the day after Thanksgiving, here in the United States, so which was obviously Thursday the 25th. So Friday the 26th, what we find is the moon in opposition to Jupiter, and this is in galactic astrology at 25, 26, 27 of Leo. This is the Atlantean degree, and if you remember, this was roughly the neighborhood of the sun and the moon, right, at the total solar eclipse of the United States in 2017 was at this degree of Leo. So the moon eclipsed the sun roughly, it might have been a couple degrees past, but it was in the same general area. Anyway, this moon in Leo, so for Virgo, you may have found yourself over Thanksgiving Day into Friday really feeling a really strong wanting to express yourself, express your sovereign nature, express like the full shining of who you are, in a very spiritual way. Also too, like past life, definitely in the 12th house, Virgo, past life, Atlantean past life, really making memories or impressions or anything related to that, maybe making its way to the surface a lot easier, maybe pulling it through for other people, because the 12th house is really the morphogenetic field and the Akash, and it's also the area where we go into isolation in order to really come back to ourselves. And so Virgo, this opposition with the moon and Jupiter over in the 6th house, where you also have Saturn, is, and that's important too. So the 6th house for Virgo, which is the Virgo house, is really got these two leadership positions taking up residence right now in the house of a personal crisis and hidden enemies and healing journeys and all of the difficult things that actually get us to get our shit together, because that's the 6th house in my estimation. And so, stuff. I think a lot of Atlantean past life stuff coming up to the surface for Virgo in the realm of the full experience of oneness, right? And so it's coming out of the past, multidimensional. It's definitely very emotional, perhaps. And then, but you also have it in opposition over here with Jupiter in Aquarius, and you have Saturn in the 6th house. So Virgos, even with that like eruption, basically, however it came through, you have Jupiter that's like over here in your 6th house, giving you a lot of resources, I think, and a lot of resources and good luck and good fortune and the capacity to see kind of the bigger picture of how to work with the Aquarian energy in terms of your daily grind, right? The 6th house. So your habits, your routines, your healing process. You have an advocate over here in terms of transmutation of those emotional energies. But the opposition, I think, really brought it right to the surface. And also too, it would have been very easy to just like totally indulge this and not even realize that you're just like, bleh. Or feeling things or having memories or dreams that you're like, what is this? And it's very expressive. Having Jupiter over here definitely, along with Saturn, I think is just like, yes, you can take this and integrate it into your own process of your reconstitution as a being incarnate in this lifetime. So this was on Friday, and then we come into Saturday with the let's see, make sure you can see this, Virgo. There we go. Come into Saturday with the Sagittarius sun squaring the moon in your 1st house. And this is really where the rest of the week is going to start unfolding for everybody, because we're talking about the house where the sun and Mercury and the South Node are all in the 4th house. I mean, you have the South Node pretty much sitting, this is all kind of like anchored into who you are emotionally, right? The 4th house is where you feel secure and safe. It's home and family of origin. It's your identity, your heritage, and the traditions. And it's specifically about the bonds and the emotional relationships that you have with, that are tight, that allow you to be an emotionally vulnerable person and to develop your self-esteem and character in the 4th house, right? So Virgo, you're going to find that the solar eclipse is also in this house. And so this first square here between the sun and the moon is the first taste in terms of you as a person, right? And how you feel about yourself, really direct connection into what makes you unique, what it is that really sets you apart from everybody else as a Virgo, the type of habits and archetypal representations that seem to really explain you as a personality the most, and just being very sensitive to it, I think, with the moon, and really feeling into that. And then but then it is in a square to, basically the home, the home life, the family life, the inner life. And this is where the biggest and where you've come from in terms of a family and the heritage and the traditions that make up where you come from as well. This is also where you gather your personal power from, right? This is the nadir. This is your root system. So a lot of focus, and ultimately the eclipse being in this realm, Virgo. So the first challenge, well, I wouldn't say the first, but definitely the challenge you're facing here is in the how you feel about yourself versus how you're expressing yourself, and really thinking about the family, right? And where you've come from and where you find yourself really rooted. So as we moved through now the rest of the week, what we're going to see first is all this Chiron energy in your 8th house. So Chiron retrograde in the 8th house of Virgo. I mean, the healing work is no joke. And it's a good thing you have Saturn and Jupiter here in the 6th house, because in terms of really, really coming to let go of some sort of wounded identity about what you produce in your relationships. And the 8th house, we know that's the Scorpio house. It is the house of power dynamics, sexual intimacy, the power of ritual and the occult, depth psychology, and our subconscious realm. This is where we actually create, is in the 8th house. Like, this is the power of our production together in any kind of communal or shared situation. So domestic shared resources with your spouse, business, shared business resources, right? Or possibly an inheritance is in the 8th house. But a lot of it too is the emotional depth and the power that comes when we come together and cooperate. Like, what we actually create ultimately up here in the 10th house is really initiate. Well, I wouldn't say initiated, but the power of generated here in the 8th house. And so Virgo is really oh, Virgo. There's something about an identity here in the 8th house. And so in terms of woundedness of identity in the 8th house, I mean, this is where a Virgo is really going to find a sense of subjective experience and initiation, because it's Aries. So you have Mercury and the Sun coming together in Sagittarius, and then each of them meeting Antares, and in a trine to Chiron. So again, there's something deep in the root structure of who you are, Virgo, either family of origin, the land you come from, where your roots, the strength of your roots is really going to be seen and thought about and very illuminated, and then and get right to the heart of it. Right, the heart of the Scorpion. It's gonna burn, but it's going to burn some things away when it comes to whatever is going on over here in the 8th house. And so Saturn was in a sextile to Chiron. Again, Saturn in your 6th house, really anchoring this journey for you, this healing journey, and the fact that you got everything it takes, right? You have these 2 leadership positions in the area that is really the Virgo house. And so one thing you know how to do, Virgo, is to be patient and do what needs to be done and be meticulous about it. So you exercise that, especially when there are areas that are very emotional, right? 4th house is Cancer, 8th house is Scorpio. So I took a lot of time with Virgo because I think this is where there's a lot going on for Virgo, and also too, because then we can move forward more quickly, because I've explained all of the transits that are happening. Neptune in your 7th house is going to station direct, and that means Mars over here in the 3rd to 7th house. It's going to get a lot more confusing, Virgo, about your interpersonal relationship, but the power that you could gain from this is it's going to teach you how to really be fully in your relationships with Neptune here. And that's been the case for years, as Neptune has been in the 7th house. So Mars here is about your immediate environment, or a 3rd house. Mars in your immediate environment. Mars that is being very forceful about where Mars stands and who Mars stands with, and obeying Mars's own conscience in this moment. And so in your immediate environment, your thoughts, when you are more honest with yourself and the people immediately around you, and you can really it's going to really help you when it comes to your relationships, because Virgo is truly themselves in interpersonal relationship when they can finally surrender to the full experience of it, because a Virgo can see the forest for the trees. And so you can totally give yourself fully emotionally to your relationships and have it be dreamy and imaginative and, a lot of unconditional love for people. So but you have to be able to establish yourself in your communications and your immediate environment and really know what's in that realm. So that's going to help too. I just think Virgos are really getting a lot, and now Venus and Pluto in your 5th house. So we're going to move forward now to Libra, because that's where the, let me see here. First, we're going to do this. All right, Libra. So now we're going to move forward here. All right, Libra. And if you don't, identify with any of these signs, I mean, here's the thing: you're still gonna get a channeling as I talk about the astrology for everybody else. So, and you could have strong Libra in your chart. Maybe you have other things that aren't your sun, moon, or rising sign that are Libra, but you have like a stack up of Libra somewhere else in your chart. It could be, or there's something transiting, or making trines or sextiles to those, or starseed markings, right? This is why it's important to understand the language rather than just one person's interpretation. I just like interpreting it. So let's see here. All right, Libra. So, nope, that's not you. There we go. I am pretty grateful to have the moon in Libra right now. It really took the edge off, and allows for us to really, Virgo time, moon in Virgo time can be very dense and very just really pull you into like everything's got to be exactly where it needs to be. But Libra, then we can apply that and kind of focus outside of ourselves. That's the thing. Virgo, you can get so into your own head. Oh my gosh. So now we look at Libra, so which is where the moon is now. So over the weekend, or Friday, we had the 3rd quarter moon. So that was the 3rd house and 12th house with the moon. And now the moon is in the 1st house of Libra. And is going to be opposite Chiron. So Libra, let's start back at the full moon just real quick. So 2nd and 8th house, resources, right? I just talked about the resources, the 8th house. The 2nd house, so the resources you came in with, right? The objective world around you. So the full moon lunar eclipse, shining really bright, a lot of activity here in your actual resources, Libra. But in terms of the resources you create in your relationships with other people, all kinds of relationships, they are going to eventually have an impact on the contribution that we all make to society. This is the power dynamics in our relationships and how we actually accumulate what we produce from people as well. So Libra, a lot of focus on, again, like what you do have and your assets, what is not very stable and what was eclipsed in terms of, full reflection back to what is normally hidden within was in this 8th house of the underworld and the subconscious and the occult, and then also just what we're producing with other people. And of course, with Uranus here, that's also, there's no real stability here. It seems to be not very settled, and as opposed to what you do have, Libra. So this puts all of the current astrology leading up to the solar eclipse in the 3rd house for Libra. So a lot of focus here on what we know, what we think we know, our immediate environment, the way we communicate, the way that we accumulate, the empirical data that we take in, the data that we take in, all of these things are commute, right? This is like short-term travel because it's about the functioning of the nervous system in relation to the world around you. And the world around you is the 2nd house. And so Chiron is in your 7th house, Libra. Neptune is in your 6th house and will station direct. So the daily activity, it's I feel like that the daily activity, what needs to be done at that level, what needs to be instituted is something that has been under consideration for Libra now for a while, obviously with Neptune in your sixth house, and now it's about to go direct, and so it's about to get a lot more powerful. But also what ends up happening in this with Neptune in the sixth house is that you tend to you can completely release yourself to this process, and then the challenge is to be able to bring yourself back into some sort of form, because the sixth house is about the form itself of the material form changing or evolving or growing. So it's going to become a lot more nebulous, I think, but also a lot more powerful for Libras to really just release it all to nothing, and then bringing yourself back to something, right? To some sort of form that has changed. So you have Jupiter and Saturn in your fifth house. This is all about who you authentically are, and your creativity and your expression. The fifth house is the Leo house. So, where's your passion? Where do you take social risks? Romanticism is in the fifth house, playfulness, joy, optimism. It's really about the individual. So Libra, you have a lot of these leadership qualities and, a lot of resources and a really strong, firm support in the area of your fifth house. And so, the moon in opposition to Jupiter at that Atlantean degree may have you really expressing that particular version of yourself in the social arena, right? Where you may just have found yourself really expressive on social media or in your larger friend group, or maybe finding yourself being very expressive about this experience for the collective, right? But it's really, the 11th house is the actual networks that we're part of other human beings, either social media, digital, or in, out there in the material real world. Either way, you may have found yourself really expressing that part of yourself in opposition to, specifically to that degree, is that we're about to go on a very difficult journey. And what that, align with the Atlantean aspect so directly in this opposition, there's a strong reverberation there, and it's important that we don't get caught up in the expression and the passion and maybe the drama of that experience. This has already gone by, but it's important that we look at this and have Jupiter be like, the big picture here is to actually bring yourself into alignment with the energies to transmute this energy, to not let it take you over, because that's the downside of Leo, is that it becomes conceit and drama and even narcissism. So and just a very loud expression of it's all about me. And so Jupiter, in terms of the 11th house versus the fifth house, a lot is kind of pulling you down into a more of a responsible, but also big picture focus on like what it is that you, Libra, feel creatively passionate about. What's really an authentic expression of you, versus, what's going on here in the larger social context. Okay, so when we have Saturn in this sextile to Chiron, this is our first anchor into this is what's going to keep us tethered to our responsibility when it comes to healing these Chiron wounds. And for you, Libra, it definitely is in your interpersonal relationships and being triggered into a sense of wounding or a victim or a savior, or just getting your attention pulled off of the whole, keeping your concentrated attention on the whole picture of who you could be. It comes out in your relationships right now, Libra, your interpersonal relationships, which is hard because that is the 7th house. So there's a lot here about you developing who you are as a person, and specifically about the way you communicate, what kind of knowledge you're working with, who's in your immediate environment, how you speak to them, how they speak to you. What is the quality of your life? And what are you learning from the world around you? This is going to be the big theme of the Sagittarian element. And the eclipse. I mean, this area of the third house for the eclipse is going to be big for Libra. So when it comes into these two, which is the Sun and Mercury, come into a trine to Chiron, well then, yes, a lot of the mind elements and the way that you communicate and the way that you interface with your immediate environment and what you know, what you think you know, what kind of data that you're working with, it's going to be right to the heart of that. It may be really deep information, but it also is going to allow for a burning away of all of the stuff that holds you back from just like being yourself in your relationships. And it's Libras as people, when they're in their relationship, they can be like the spark of life. And that's what seems to get, every time that happens, there seems to be a trigger that's just like, no, you can't be that. Or no, that you're not really thinking about other people if you just like are in this creative, or not even this creative moment, but just, spark. You are this, you create the spark when you come into relationship with people. And I think, it's going to be a lot. It has something to do with communication, Libra, to have all of this third house energy. Now, we talked about Neptune. So your resources, Libra, your actual assets, either your genetic resources, your actual currency, the objective world around you that holds resources. And it's really going to be your ability to speak to what it is you... tradition, right? The second house can be tradition and the ancestry that you come from, but it really is going to be speaking, and not even speaking, but acting in accordance with what's valuable to you, basically. And it will, in fact, allow you to dissolve yourself and dissolve everything that you may have worked in order to create for yourself, because ultimately, you know what you're made of in the second house. So it's going to allow you to actually evolve and change by when Neptune goes direct. I think it's going to be a huge deluge of power, and it's going to really just start pushing you, not even pushing you, you'll just start dissolving into almost completely with Neptune and Pisces. But what it will allow for you is to come into a completely new version of yourself, which is going to be a big part of healing this Chiron wound. But it's that third house, Libra, of communication that's going to be eclipsed. So the second and, but definitely the third house, in terms of what you have to get out of your immediate environment in order to move into the next cycle completely new. That's a big question, Libra. Oh my Lord. All right. So, that's Libra. So we're going to move into, Scorpio, because the moon's coming into your sign, here in any minute now. Well, any day, not any minute, any day. So, and this is, Scorpio, no joke, because you have, you really, the Scorpio set the tone for this whole lunar cycle, because we had, and with Antares at the heart of the Scorpion, I mean, this is, you got Mars in your first house, Scorpio. This is a lot. There's going to be a lot going on in terms of who you are and the world around you. And so Scorpio, okay, so let's start at the beginning. We know that the eclipse was along your first and seventh house. At the full moon lunar eclipse is along your first and seventh house axis. So it's about you and who you are in relationships, which is what was eclipsed. And with Uranus there, that certainly is not finding any stability either. It seems like it's probably changing quite a bit, because Scorpio people, it's just so intense, and the capacity to really get into the underlying structures of all relationships is also very intense, and has been highlighted because we've had the Sun and Mercury and now Mars. So we know that it's really about identity of self and in relationship for Scorpio, because, it's good, because as we move into the Pleiadian revival and the nodes start shifting into Taurus and Scorpio, and we have the South Node at Scorpio, Scorpios really need to know who they are, and who they are not, and who they are in their relationships, because knowing that is going to make them such an ally in terms of propelling us forward, because who they are in relationships is Taurus. So it's a big part of learning who you are. And this is a drawn out process because the full moon is in your seventh house. You have Uranus in the seventh house. It's going to be, it's not going to be as apparent as maybe we would like, but that's, the Scorpio person is pretty comfortable just going into the depths and maybe, waiting or developing ways to see through the murkiness or to feel through the murkiness. So the eclipse, the solar eclipse for Scorpio is going to be in the second house of resources. And so it's the meaning in that is discovered by Scorpio about themselves. It's the meaning that they work with outside of them to really do their magic. And so let's see here. First, we had the moon in Virgo in the 11th house, was in a square to the sun in the second house. Now, this, oftentimes we can get confused when we have something like the sun in the second house and confuse what our assets are with our identity. So this is something to consider, especially because the South Node is here, Scorpio, that the Sagittarian element, although part of who, what we work with, and in terms of second house and the objective world around us and our assets and resources, it is not who we are. So that's something to consider, and just keep in mind, Scorpio. So the moon in the 11th house for that third quarter moon for Scorpio was really about resources, but really also like feeling into the ability to hold your own within the social collective, right? This is very interesting, considering that you could really go, you yourself as a Scorpio can go into some very deep places. And so being able to know the difference between you and yourself and other people, and your boundaries psychologically, your energetic hygiene within the collective, I think was really felt, and specifically in relation to what you're really identifying your resources are, and maybe coming to a much more clearer mental awareness of what your resources are, and feeling very strong with Mars in your first house. So this is important because the opposition from the Leo moon over to Jupiter in your 4th and 10th house, I mean, this can be very strong tendency to be in the public arena and to really contribute in some way through the expression of that Atlantean overlap, right? With the moon in Leo, and how, the fact that we have everything that we need in order to go through a very long journey. But Jupiter and Saturn especially are really pulling your energy down into your 4th house, your personal life, and what it is that allows you to feel safe and secure emotionally, and to actually build your character. And so home and family, personal life, inner life. So there would tendency to be involved, and really express yourself especially with all the Scorpio energy. I mean, we're in a Scorpio lunar cycle. So of course you were feeling it up here, I would say, but the energy is really pulling it down, into the areas about who you are, especially who you are, because even Chiron is in your 6th house. And so Scorpio has a lot of work that they could be doing right now with themselves, specifically around healing the need to go a journey of reconstitution, and to not be afraid to find renewal in that process. And there's something that's fundamentally holding Scorpios back with Chiron in their 6th house, like really, really keeping Scorpio people from finding the potency of what could be by going into this healing journey or journey of reconstitution. Maybe it has to do with like putting in, a whole new routine, or putting in a whole new set of habits, or just, just making a commitment to being a new person, like coming into newness about oneself, with more, with Mars in your 1st house, you really could do this. But the thing is, we have So Saturn, again, sextile Chiron over the weekend. So again, it comes back to home and family, the inner life, the personal life, like it's time to start acting on the vision in terms of what that means in order to really take the most advantage of healing and, really activating a healing or a purification of this, is holding you back from being able to concentrate on yourself, I think. There's something there with that. And so there's something about being anchored in your personal life, something about being anchored in home and family, and to really find the big picture there that is going to at least started the process over here in this sixth house work. It's what we're going to find is that it has a lot to do with what you identify as your resources. And so really large clarity about what's brewing under the surface when Mercury and the Sun came together yesterday in Cazimi, and then each of them meeting Antares, right? The heart of the Scorpion, and then trine to Chiron over here. So it has something to do with your resources and probably some sort of genetic resource, like some sort of DNA imprinting, perhaps, Scorpio, that could stand to be purified out of you. Maybe actual resources, the land, the house you live on, and what needs to be purified is going to be a process that we know is going to be more elongated through the next 6 months. And so at least knowing who you are, you got Mars in your first house and then Neptune in your fifth house. And so there's that deluge or that really strong amplification of creativity and imagination and being at one with source. Neptune in Pisces is it's going to get more nebulous in terms of the fifth house, but you may find yourself taking, having this really broad idealistic idea of the social risks you may take, because you're feeling so strong about yourself right now. And I really caution it's really easy with Neptune in the fifth house to take risks based off of really broad, idealistic, kind of very imaginative, but not rooted in anything in real. It seems like the rooting things in real is in your immediate, your inner life, your home life, your personal life, rather than necessarily what is, you can be dreamy, and I think that'll get even dreamier, honestly, but when Neptune goes direct in your fifth house, you just got to make sure that you don't necessarily take unnecessary risks that are based on, I'm just trying to assert myself in this moment, because the eclipses in your solar eclipse in the second house is showing that there are things in your coding and in your resources that are going to be purified, right? They're going to be purified. This doesn't mean that you can't dream. And I think Scorpio has been dreaming about what really gets them going now for a while. It's just when it goes direct, it's going to be just a total washover. And then the tendency with the Neptune, the fifth house, is to definitely get caught up in the full experience of being immersed in everything and everyone, and take action or express ourselves through that. So that's also could be like you find yourself and you are anchored in yourself with Mars here in terms of bringing the broad humanitarian aspect right into your own joy. That's also, you have to be very clear with yourself about that, though, and be also very aware of the rest of these dynamics that are going to play out, because you get a sense here about what it is that really gets you going and what can bring you, bringing the transcendental experience, the full experience of the collective emotionally right into what you are passionate about. This is really powerful, Scorpio. You could find yourself really stepping into a real initiatory type of experience within yourself, like identifying yourself as this hero warrior. and finding a real strong connection to what it is that you truly, what gets you going and what you're truly passionate about, and what allows you to express yourself authentically. That'll be good, because when Neptune stations direct after today, it'll be on the 1st, then it will become way more foggy in this realm. So this is kind of our last stand over here. And for Scorpio, it's about who you are and what makes you unique in reference to everyone else. There's a tendency to get kind of caught up in the feeling experience of the collective if we're not careful, especially having a Libra 12th house. I mean, you're doing everything you can to balance out the karma, and that's a great thing. I think that you have to be realistic, though, about the eclipse in your 2nd house. So that's for Scorpio. Sag, okay, Sagittarius. Okay, hold on, we'll get this going here. Sag. Sag season. Oh, it's so hard. It's not really, but wow. It's all about you. And it really is. It really is, Sag. It's all about you. So, we know that for Sagittarius rising, we know that first, the full moon lunar eclipse was along the axis of the 12th and 6th house. Sagittarius, the moon, the eclipsed moon, and Uranus in the 6th house is not providing much stability or clarity, for that matter, in terms of a healing journey, personal reconstitution, implementing new routines, healing, like I said, healing from something, either emotionally or physically, or even mentally, getting new habits into place, really doing the deep inner work on the daily basis. So there hasn't been a lot of clarity about exactly how to initiate that, or like where, or even stability around that. And then how do we even mature in that way, is something that is going to take some time to really be brought to our inner awareness, I think. And then on top of that, you have Mercury and the Sun in the 1st house. They came into the Cazimi yesterday, meeting each other. And so, I mean, Sag is going to change so much, especially because the eclipse is in the 1st house. And so Sagittarius people are really going to find a purification over the next 6 months of who they are as a person. With the eclipse happening in the 1st house. So that also means that the moon was in the 10th house when it was in a square to the sun on Friday. And so, again, being able to have an objective approach to our own life force, to be able to objectively handle it and be meticulous about our energy and have really good energetic hygiene. For Sagittarius, sitting up here in the 10th house of your public life, your professional life, and then to have, and to be very focused on that aspect, and to feel how important it is, not just to yourself, but to everyone that you are contributing with. And so, like a large family, a corporate structure, right, a government, a large institution, whatever it is that you're contributing to, maybe just energetically contributing to society in general. I think Sagittarius, we're really feeling into the need here in this moment at that level. It's like, I know, and this is why it's so important for Sag, because ultimately there's a knowing that that energetic hygiene has to be employed in the professional or public scene, or, in terms of what our mission is, because so much of the Sagittarian personality and the unique person is about to undergo really big change. So, in some ways, this is kind of like, remember to keep your shit together in this place. And that's where this square was, because the Sun in Sagittarius is just like, everything about me is about the group solidarity. And yes, that's right. This made it really a personalized feeling of like, okay, if the group solidarity is what I'm all about and it defines my personality in this moment, I have to still be aware that my actual emotions, my own hygiene energetically, my own routines, habits, my own practices, my own work on myself is actually just as important to just the big picture of like, we're all in this together. Oh, Sag, it's going to be okay. But Sagittarius rising people are going to change the most after, they are, in terms of their identity, is going to be really initiated by this eclipse season. So Chiron in the 5th house, Sagittarius is struggling with getting out of the victim identity when it comes to or a savior complex when it comes to what is my joy, right? Because for a Sagittarius person, their joy has a lot to do with just expressing themselves as the spark of life, right? The fire that sparks, because Sagittarius is a fire sign. So the thing that sparks the fire that eventually leads to who you are is the beginning of the cycle, right? The creative potential that is brought into existence at the moment of conception. Or if you want to think about it as the moment that the seed is planted in the ground, then it actually starts to initiate the processes of growth. If you just leave a seed in a baggie, it's not going to, you have to actually, put it in the right medium for it to start its process. And this is the space of joy and creative expression for a Sagittarius. So there is some serious blockage, Sagittarius, in terms of getting out of your savior narrative or role or your victim role, and really being able to focus on what it is that is your joy. And this is not going to go away anytime soon. Chiron's going to be in Aries for years. So this is something that, as a larger cohort, Sagittarius people are just going to be addressing this consistently. So, but in the meantime, we have Jupiter and we have Saturn in the 3rd house. So we know that we have these leadership potential, the ability to really manage the big picture with Jupiter, and then the actual board of directors that make the decision, or Jupiter is the lawyer and Saturn is the judge, right? Both in the 3rd house. And so when the moon was in opposition to Jupiter, as we see here in the 9th and 3rd house, that Atlantean energy coming through the moon, Leo at that moment, just in the big picture there, in belief systems coming through, Jupiter in that opposition was like, yes, you feel, there was a strong feeling in terms of the belief system in that moment, and really going to be challenged in a journey about, what do we really believe as Sagittarians? So, and Jupiter really bringing it down to normally the territory that is opposite of the Sagittarian, which is actually the 9th house, and saying, really, you want to focus and manage yourself and your own emotional energies within the realm of what you know, right? What's right in front of you, and find your stability there. Because that's going to be where we are going to make, Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius. So you really want to find and track your planetary ruler, and having it here with Saturn. I mean, it's all about what's right in front of you, and what how your nervous system is functioning. Like, what are your neural pathways? What is it that, how are you engaging with your life through your mind on a regular basis? This is where the leadership and the stability is really anchored. And so, but the belief system, right? The big picture of the 9th house into the 10th house, which is what we create through that belief system, what we contributed to. When the moon's moving here, it was definitely reminding Sagittarian people, feeling into like what it feels like to be in the group situation, so that when we start addressing again, identity and what we think and what we know and how we react and respond to our immediate environment. And then with Chiron, which is our joy and our passion, we can say, okay, we want to have this be, I would say the moon here was giving us an opportunity to like check in with what it currently feels like in those areas. And if we need to make adjustments anywhere else around here, especially before this eclipse happens on the 4th. So Neptune stations direct, okay, and is in a is in a trine with Mars today in the 12th house. So Neptune stationing direct, Neptune in the 4th house. I mean, this dissolves all of your traditions and all of those boundaries that normally would be the layer outside of you that holds and protects you emotionally so you can grow into a person, or your root structure. Neptune is is dissolving all of that. So up until the first, what we're experiencing at some level is this this dissolution of all the traditions and the boundaries and even the protective boundaries of home and family is just like, and the benefit of that is that you get to dissolve them all down so completely that then again you can go wider, right? It allows your root system to actually spread out when they're not so rigid, or it's more malleable, just like Pisces would be, is like it can just extend into like some sort of mycelial network. So, but Sagittarius, you've been thinking about this for a while, and so when Neptune stations direct, it's going to then finally start spreading out, and it might be kind of a little unnerving at first if you've been really relying on this 4th house to stabilize you. It's a good thing it's Pisces, because then you can just be like, oh, it's all the realm of the spirit is where I'm the most grounded. So in some ways, Sagittarius might actually fare fairly well. And with Mars in the 12th house in that trine today, again, it's like knowing who we are in the big picture, right? In terms of we are obeying our conscience based on the principles of unconditional love and forgiveness and compassion. And it's come through our ability to really know ourselves and to dissolve back into the truth of all is one. And so Mars will, be very forceful, but also very, very intense, but also again, the hero here is able to just be like, no, this is where I belong. And so again, there's strong, for how watery Scorpio and Pisces are, and to have Mars and Neptune as rulers in these areas, and to have it be a water house and a water house, I think Sagittarius is actually primed pretty well to get a lot of power from this, while there is then the initiation of a massive change in identity, and who you identify yourself as. And so, which is also going to have a big impact on this blockage that's keeping Sagittarian people from really just allowing themselves to find their own joy and optimism for just being themselves, basically. So Sag, lots of work, but at the same time, I feel like Sagittarius are really ready to go through this. So we're going to go on to Capricorn next, because this is, Venus and Pluto are in your 1st house. So talk about another experience of dissolution of self. Capricorn has had Pluto in your 1st house for years and years now. So that's been a slow burn, much slower than what it'll be for Sag. That's an eclipse that is initiating a purification by fire. For Capricorn, it's been a slow burn for a decade plus. So let's look at this Capricorn. So we know that the eclipse was 11th and 5th house. So we've been talking about these houses, and the 11th house is the social organism that you're part of. So your networks, your associations, your larger friend group and social group, the organizations you're part of, and the larger social media groups you're part of. And it's really where what you identify as where you are realizing your mission within. So it can be as wide as the global community and beyond, okay? But it's really the Aquarian social organism as a whole is the 11th house. So the eclipse, the lunar eclipse along the 11th house and 5th house, no problems over here, Capricorn, in terms of the larger context that you find yourself in or know yourself in, what seems to be unstable and had very little clarity is who you are, Capricorn. And of course, that is being brought right to the surface of who you are with Venus in Capricorn in your first house and Pluto being here for years and years and years. So understanding your joy and your optimism and having it not be very stable, or what that, or in some ways, allowing you to identify with many different options and not actually wanting the stability. I don't know. I think that's up to you to figure out, but definitely some not seeing it clearly in terms of what you need to release in order to grow into the next stage of your own joy and expression, Capricorn. And I think that that's just going to be part of Pluto's transit through the rest of your first house, wherever you find it. So when the moon was in opposition to Jupiter, so you have Jupiter and Saturn in your second house, Capricorn. So, these two players of the lawyer and the judge, right? The big harsh reality here, both setting up in your second house. I mean, this is where you're really going to, really step into the maturity and leadership that, a Capricorn person really just exudes anyway from, their identity. Capricorn is the boss, right? That's just all there is to it. They know how to get shit done. They know how to motivate people, and and Saturn, right? It's the judge. It is the patriarch in some ways. So it's all about your resources right now, because what is changing, like I said, and has been, is your identity, first of all, like a slow burn, but a transformational potential. And now Venus here in your first house, I mean, a lot about your own self-value and, especially how you identify with the feminine within you, Capricorn. I mean, you could really be identifying with yourself as like a woman in a leadership position, or just really starting to value the responsibility and valuing yourself and how responsible you are, and how you step up and take initiative and ambitious enough and know what it takes to get things done. And I really have enjoyed Venus in Capricorn lately, because she really is just getting down to it and giving us patience and wisdom. So that's the other thing too. It's almost like Capricorn has the capacity to just, like, I don't need to know, because I'm just so like rooted in my root chakra and in the material experience. Like, I'm not afraid of it. I don't find it overwhelming. I don't find life to be anything more than an opportunity to create things. And that's what Capricorn ultimately does, because you have to be responsible and committed in order to unfold the matrix of reality. And that's the other thing that Capricorn represents. It is the physical nature of our reality based on the fractal geometry that explains it. So, the moon in opposition to the Leo moon in opposition to Jupiter. Again, this is a resource moment here, and Capricorn, I think, really coming into a very dark but intense awareness on an emotional or intuitive level, maybe in your dreamscape about Atlantis or the Atlantean themes coming out very strongly in this underlying space. So in the subconscious, maybe is being expressed in your dream state, but also the resources that you create with other people, right? Seeing that the power isn't really in what's been created, Capricorn, it's in the relationships. And when you have Leo in your 8th house, I mean, it really does put you at the center of these productive relationships, which makes sense being a Capricorn person. What is pulling you back down to reality here is, again, acknowledging your resources and realizing that they come from the collective and not just from you. That is an important distinction, Capricorn, to have a Leo in your 8th house. So just be aware of that. Now, Saturn is in a sextile to Chiron. Chiron's in your 4th house. So Capricorn, the big identity issues around victim, savior narrative, walking away from your identity as a wounded person, is in your 4th house. of home and family. So Capricorn, you have some really strong family, traditional types of experiences that are needing to be let go of, or the identity that you used to have about yourself within this context is ready to be released. And, you know, it's going to be a themes that continue to come up for Capricorn as Chiron, you know, moves through your fourth house, depending on where your fourth house actually is. But this is the area, this is the area that the healing journey is really showing itself, is your personal life, basically, Capricorn, which is, as an Aries, you know, you really find yourself like, you know, it's in your personal life, it's in your intimate relationships, maybe your marriage, in your home and family, in your inner life, that you really find the spark of who you are. And there's something really keeping you from being okay with that. So there's something about, again, your resource comes from the collective as a whole. And so the sextile to Chiron from Saturn, which is still very much active, and Saturn is your planetary ruler, Capricorn, or your chart ruler, sorry, is your chart ruler. So this is even more important for you, Capricorn, that the seer has to become the doer. And maybe you need to set an example in your personal life or in your immediate family in some way, to really heal your own wounds, and perhaps that will set up a chain reaction that will impact everyone else around you. So that's a possibility. Now, let's see here. It's really the 12th house and the end of the line here, which again, you have Pluto right now and Venus right now, and there's a lot of stuff's going to come into the first house for you in January, of course. So this eclipse is really going to initiate purification by fire in your karma, in the collective karma that you're part of, and the end of the line, right? That's the 12th house. And so Sun and Mercury in the 12th house, there's a lot of tying up of loose ends, putting a lot of your mental focus on these types of themes of the karma, the collective karma. Really coming to, at this point, really let some things go of what you've been part of, so that you can truly make the most out of Pluto moving through your first house over the next couple of years too. So this is going to be the area that is getting the most attention, is in the 12th house for you, Capricorn. So the Sun and Mercury come together. This Cazimi that happened yesterday really, I think for Capricorn, was a pretty strong insight into what's been bubbling under the surface for you. And part of that is because Pluto's been destroying so much of the top layers, that now there is the opportunity for what's deep underneath to start coming out. And each of them meeting Antares and trining Chiron, lots of past life karma, Capricorn, that's going to be cleared away as a result of being able to and seeing the past. I think that's a big part of it, being very aware of the past and the social karma that we're all part of, being able to really give voice to that and to see it for what it is. And hold the sting of the Scorpion is going to be so impactful on healing these family wounds, or these wounds of being yourself in your inner life or your emotional relationship, because Capricorn and Cancer, right? You are there to be some sort of protector or provider or nourisher or father, mother, right? And so you have to still be yourself. And you keep getting held back with Chiron here, because it keeps pulling you back into an identity that you are so ready to let go of. And it's going to come through, maybe you'll be inspired by a muse. Maybe you'll have just this aha moment in terms of, like, while you're meditating or something, or praying. That's a lot of 12th house. But just know too that the solar eclipse will be elongated over the next 6 months. So what is being purified is going to take some time in terms of this larger social, spiritual, transcendental, situation, right? The past, the future, and everything in between. So, but it's directly related here into this inner life and family life, this identity that needs to be released. And then Capricorn, you have Neptune in your third house. So it's bringing all of the transcendental stuff, probably from the 12th house area, right up to your immediate environment. So you kind of can't get away. So when you act or initiate some action that has to do with you obeying your own conscience within Capricorn, the full social order that you're part of, speaking out, saying no, or acting in a way that says no, right? Maybe you do something in defiance that's just like, nope, or you refuse to follow orders, Capricorn, it's going to be right. It's like it's going to be right in your immediate environment somehow. It's going to be right there, and those two things are going to encourage each other. So Capricorn, I think you have so much of it's almost like you have so much of the responsibility right now of initiating some sort of larger karmic purification, like on a social level. And it's being initiated or being brought right into a lot of work, again, on who you are, but then you also do have all of this. You have the Sagittarian energy being in your 12th house. So, which is perfect for Capricorn, right? I mean, you're so badass that, and you're really stepping into a position of, self-value around this. Like there's so much value to who you are. And there's some really deep stuff that's going to be burned away for Capricorn. And it's going to make so much of a difference in not just your life. It's going to impact so many other people, Capricorn, more so than it seems like other people, other signs. So then we're going to get into our friend Aquarius. And let's see here. All right. How's everybody doing so far? Are you liking this format? I'm really enjoying myself because I love to do readings. I mean, and so in some ways, this is what I'm just getting to do for everybody. All right, so here is Aquarius. Maybe. Yeah, here's Aquarius, my friends. So we know that the 10th and 4th house of Scorpio and Taurus is where the Aquarian full moon eclipse happens. So public life, professional life, mission, career, what you're here to contribute to this whole circus, pretty illuminated, and especially moving from the 10th into the 11th house, Aquarius. A lot of attention, action, communication, focus is all seeming to be around the 10th house, the 11th house, right? The mission, the career, and the social organism that is realized within. So Aquarius, I mean, this is kind of your wheelhouse being in the 11th house. That is the Aquarian house. And, Aquarian people love humanity, hate humans, which is an exaggeration, but it's like, it really does exemplify the distinctness of Aquarian people in relation to everyone around them. A lot of the times it's just like, yeah, I get it. I'm tapped into the gnosis of all there is, but then coming back down to, Leo level, which is like, it's all about me and my personal experience. That's a little harder for Aquarius. So, there's a lot of attention up here in this area. So, but what is really the struggle for Aquarian people right now is this 4th house, right? Uranus in the 4th house. You have the eclipsed moon was in the 4th house. This is the personal life, where we draw power from, our stabilization, our root system, not very stable, and home life, intimate personal life, not very stable. That's not necessarily a terrible thing. It's especially Uranus right now. There's a lot of options that we have the opportunity to gaze upon. It's just like we could have anything. It's just letting go of what is ready to be released in order to come into the next mature cycle is something we're not seeing right away as Aquarian people. So, but Mars in the 10th house, Neptune in the second house, I mean, we have to, in some ways, it's just, we're still just going to focus as Aquarians, just focus on what we're doing up here in the larger context and just roll with it and realize that, there's a lot of other stuff going on. That is making an impact on who we are and the more personalized experiences here in the second house and third house. So we know, speaking of Aquarius, we saw that the moon in the seventh house, wow, that was an intense time. As an Aquarius rising person, to have the moon move through my seventh house in Leo like that, I was just like, man, everything, I really wanted to make everything about me in my personal relationships. I was really struggling. But what I felt was that it was showing us something that we needed to know about how we interface in our interpersonal relationships, so that we use that as a way to, or see that as our mirror, so that we transmute those energies within ourselves, right? To make ourselves as Aquarians more fortified. And speaking of fortification, I mean, Saturn's here too. So there's Aquarian people are finding a lot of leadership in both management and the more sustained and structured and institutionalized aspects of ourselves, very very anchored. And so when there were aspects about how we felt in our relationships and how we felt in the dark spaces of what we were creating with other people, we were able to really hold our own self in alignment without it getting too pulled into the dynamic of the relationship in general. It was important to go into that space. And so the moon in Virgo squared that sun over in the 11th house. So again, a lot of focus over here, Aquarius, on the social organism that we find ourselves a part of, right? And indistinguishable from, which is where Aquarius likes to be. But then we had to feel into the actual depth of experience of how we would eventually get there, what we're producing in our relationships. And I think that was very difficult and kind of painful, to be perfectly honest. So if you felt like that, Aquarius, there is a reason that was really transpiring. But we kept it, it was like, keep your chin up and really focus your energy on the collective and finding your voice and expression through, what we're doing for the collective. And then you have Mars here in your 10th house. In the 10th house, really giving us a lot of initiation and action in our career or in our mission, which actually, with that, the resource realm is going to become very fluid for Aquarius. Now, it's always like this, and the difficult part about it is that there is just never any solidity to one's resources, right? It just seems to slip through your fingers constantly. But the other thing, the mastery level of Pisces in the second house, is that everything energetic can be made a resource, and that's what the Aquarians do, is the water bearer. So what we see here is that it's going to become more nebulous what resources we have at our disposal, right? And there is a certain amount of trust in what we are here to do, Aquarius, that will be, will be the end point, right? Just like I said about the really strong flowing river that's going to go out to the ocean. And this is the ocean, Neptune and Pisces. And it's going to be much more once Mars moves out of this trine to Neptune, then and Neptune stations direct, all we're going to have is the ocean. And so there's something here about really sticking to our conscience when it comes to our mission, and really acting through that and acting in our own, in this hero nature in our mission, while Neptune is still retrograde in the second house, because we're going to need to remember this in some ways when Neptune stations direct and resources become we have to be more creative and realize that the energy of consciousness and source is our greatest resource. And sometimes that can be a little scary when you are, relying upon actual physical resources, which would, they can be manifested. I mean, that's what the Aquarian can do. So we see that, again, Saturn is in a sextile to Chiron, Chiron in the third house. So Aquarian people are really working with the thought processes and the neural pathways that have to do with this wounded healer type of energy that needs to be rooted out of all of us, of course, or at least acknowledged, right? The least we can do is acknowledge that it's there. And again, it's going to come from our Aquarian nature, the Saturn in our first house, making us like, very staunchly who we are. And, it's my way or the highway sometimes. It's just like, this is the letter of the law about who I am, and there's nothing that can break that. And Saturn does rule Aquarius as well. So it's very powerful here in terms of identity. And so sextile to Chiron like that for Aquarius people, it's like we can, it's about the neural pathways, about what you think about yourself, basically. And rewiring those pathways in order to really start to choose who we are, rather than sticking with an identity that's just a karmic trench that's been dug out by our own minds for so long because of what's been imposed upon us. So Saturn in the first house really anchoring us into identity. So when Sun and Mercury come into a gazimi in the 11th house of just like, oh, look, what everything in the social collective, everything that is been brewing under the surface is now starting to come up and be realized. It's going to then trine Chiron. And so there's something that will be released, maybe not entirely because of the eclipse, but it will certainly be brought up from the heart of the Scorpion or Antares that's will in the larger social order that will allow the Aquarian to be like, oh, I see where the wires are crossed now, or I see how I get pulled off track in my neural pathways when I'm trying to really focus on my full nature of who I am and define who I am, rather than be the victim of an old narrative that I've been telling myself. But it's going to come through this like social purification and a real strong mental conception and expression even of what is going on at the social level, right? What's been brewing under the surface and what really is at the heart of the meaning. And when this happens, this can be so cleansing for Aquarius, okay, with this Chiron. And then like I talked about with Mars going direct, Neptune going direct and resources being nebulous for the Aquarian person, and then the purification by fire, right? The retribution of the solar eclipse in the larger social context or the neighborhood. This could really express itself in a lot of ways, but I think that for Aquarian people, it's going to be, since it's the 11th house and that is the Aquarian house, it's also going to be something that will it's linked to who we are so much that we're just going to have to let it all play out at a social level over the next couple of months and not try to get too attached to what is happening, but be kind of a witness. And that's the best thing an Aquarius can do, because they have the capacity to be the most, I don't want to say detached or aloof, but this is where you are able to use the emotional intensity as a resource and not be identified with it. So as we move into, let's move to Pisces here as we go through this, and let's see. All right, Pisces. Neptune's in your first house. Talk about not knowing who you are, or not even realizing that you are a person separate from everybody else. This is about to get a lot stronger. A lot stronger. So there will be no difference between you and everybody else, which will in some ways make Pisces people a really really good source of inspiration, because they're going to be fully engaged in what it's like to be inseparable from the experience of everybody else, because Neptune's stationing direct. So let's go back a little bit and look at the eclipse. So the full moon lunar eclipse is along the 3rd and 9th house axis. So what you think, what you know, your immediate environment's not very stable, is it, Pisces? And certainly what needs to be released in terms of resources in the immediate environment was not also very obvious to you, was it, Pisces? Chiron is in the 2nd house, and so the real narratives of being a victim or a savior, or having to continue to identify with an old version of self, that wounded healer, is in resources for the Pisces person. So it's really, and speaking of resources, I mean, when it comes to career and the midheaven, these two houses are very linked. They're both earth, right? Taurus and Capricorn. And so for you, Pisces, it's very fire. So Sagittarius is up here in your 10th house, your career and your mission. And so this is where a lot of the attention is going to be. We find that Saturn and Jupiter are in your 12th house, Pisces. And so the leadership and the responsibility and also the resources you need in order to get to the bigger picture of the end of the cycle and the spiritual nature of all of it is very Pisces just has a lot going on in this area, which is the Pisces house, of course, is the 12th house. And so in some ways you have all this badassery in your 12th house that you're going to function a lot better in this realm, I think, than you will in the realm of who you are. And so in some ways, the fact that Neptune's stationing direct, your chart ruler in the 1st house, just kind of like allowing you to dissolve right into the experience is going to be just fine, because you have these two aspects that are flanking you in the 12th house, right? The 12th house, or the space of Pisces, has just got a lot of resources and a skeleton, some scaffolding here as well. And so in some ways, I feel like Pisces will actually be able to really let themselves go, because Mars in your 9th house, I mean, you're really feeling pretty spicy about your belief systems and where you feel like you feel the big picture, the truth is, and you're ready to act on it really strongly in a way that's like resisting everything around you that says it should be something different. And so in some ways you'll be able, I think, really to let yourself go into the full range of the experience of oneness within yourself, because your belief system, depending on what your belief system, because it's going to be challenged, right? You're going to speak very strongly and act very directly on the larger context of the social paradigm, the belief systems, the religions, spirituality, metaphysics, whatever. The 9th house is the philosophy, of life and the meaning of it all. It's pretty, you're willing to act on it and really stand your ground in that. It will, in fact, be allow for you to really just let yourself go and to dissolve into the full range of the experience, into your very personhood. So again, Pisces people will probably be very capable of being some source of inspiration, maybe a channel of some sort, or at least just be very grounded in the nebulous realm of the 12th house, because there's just so much here. And a big part of that is because the moon, when it was in Leo, was in the 6th house of Pisces in opposition. And so I think there may have been a really very combust expression of how important it is for you to get your shit together, and your shit together in particular, and to really take it very seriously. And I think that the opposition with Jupiter over here is like, you got this. In fact, you've probably already done this in past lives to really like transmute your emotional energy. I think really Pisces probably had a very, I wouldn't say easy time, but I think that if you saw it for, if you just realized how important it was for you to be yourself and to express yourself creatively in terms of really conditioning yourself, I think that this opposition was not nearly as there's just a lot of, again, Pisces, it has a lot to do with the mission, right? Your mission, Pisces. So you have a lot of backup in this realm, though. So the moon in Virgo in your 7th house, Pisces, squaring the sun over here in your career house. I think that Pisces, where the discomfort really will come from, is in how are you supposed to really be discerning in your relationships and be very meticulous about who you're engaged with when you lose yourself completely? Well, it's probably going to have a lot to do with this 9th house area and your belief systems and what you are willing to really stick to, but also to, being very energetically hygienic about who you're in interpersonal relationship with, Pisces. That's going to be really important in the long run. Chiron in your 2nd house, resources are the issue in terms of your identity, right? And Saturn was in a sextile, but then you have all of the energy with the sun and Mercury in your 10th house that's just it's just going to bring so much light and brightness to your mission, and also to get right to the heart of it, the painful truth of what you're here to do, Pisces. But what it will do and allow for in some ways is to burn off all of the old identities around where you come from in terms of your resources and your ancestry, and allow yourself to utilize the spark of life as your resource. But there's something about your professional and public life, Pisces, that is really going to not only go through a big change over the next 6 months from belief system into your career or your higher education into your career, perhaps, but it also feels like that it's going to be directly related to resources and what assets you have at your disposal. Because if you can't get past that, then everything, what's going on up here is going to be, it's not going to have the same meaning if it's coming from a resource, an initial resource or asset that feels wounded or like a victim, right? And so as these crossover Antares in your mission, it's just there's going to be something that you have to resolve, or you will be shown that you have to resolve in terms of what your mission is, that's going to have to take you back in time in some ways to be you have to stay focused on what your assets really are, and not get pulled into what you think you should be doing and what you think you should have, because that's, who you are as a person is, like I said, it's going to dissolve so completely. Oh, Pisces. And if you are not able to use resources without feeling guilty about it, this is going to have a really strong impact on your mission in general. And so Pisces is going to kind of be in this outside of time in some ways, because you're going to see here what it is that your career or mission, what's bubbling under the surface, what is going to be made very aware. You're going to be very aware of it, of what your mission or your career or your contribution really is. And you're also going to get to the heart of some aspect about it that is going to allow for a purification of at an ancestral level, perhaps, like your genetics or your DNA memory even. And maybe that is just the mission, right? Is that you realize that part of what you're here to do is to, obviously as a Sagittarian 10th house, is, to be in a position of either leadership or guidance or, seeing the big picture, and maybe even showing people alchemy. That's what I'm trying to say. There we go. So this alchemy that is part of what you're here to contribute to, Pisces, you have to go back in time kind of and really assess what you're bringing to the table in the first place. And And as the moon transits your 7th, 8th, and then comes into the 9th house, I mean, take some time, Pisces, to really feel out what this feels like, because it's going to give you a lot of insight into what you're already experiencing in terms of your interpersonal relationships, what you produce in those relationships, and what the meaning of them is, which is the 9th house. Because you're going to need to know, I think, what the meaning of all of those are as your personality goes under like a total dissolution. Dissolution, that's what I'm trying to say. And the career house is what's going to be eclipsed over the next, so the mission is changing, I would say, or the mission needs to be updated in some way. And so over the next 6 months, that's going to go through its own process of being purged, things being purged away that can't go into the next mission. So it's important work that's being done, but it's going to really, I think that it's really going to be a difficult journey for Pisces. So, and I'm not here to sugarcoat it for you guys at all. So we're going to go into Aries, of course, now that we are coming back around to the beginning, or the beginning of the astrological chart, at least. All right, guys. All right, Aries, let's go. We are talking, Chiron's in your 1st house, so no surprises there, I'm sure, in terms of your actual identity going through this, am I a victim? Am I a savior? Who am I? Who am I without this identity? Oh, Aries. So what we found here is first that the eclipse is in, the full moon lunar eclipse was in the 2nd and 8th house axis. So we are seeing a lot of illumination in terms of what we're producing together. What we're producing together, Aries rising people, and the meaning of it especially. This is going to be a big part of the overall theme for Aries, is the meaning of our the power of our relationships, the meaning underlying it, the alchemical fire that actually tempers these things down and creates something. This is the area that Aries is really going to have probably with the solar eclipse and being in Sagittarius time, this is a lot of the focus for Aries right now. So with the eclipse of the moon and Uranus in the 2nd house, Aries people, there's not a lot of stability, and certainly there wasn't clear reflection back to Aries about resources. And so resources themselves in Taurus are not very stable for Aries people. It's changing a lot, and how, what needs to be released at that level was not something that was made very clear to Aries people. What is very clear seems to be a consistent poking of a wound of self for Aries people. So the moon was in a square with the sun for that 3rd quarter square on the 27th. And before that, the moon in the 5th house was opposite Jupiter in the 11th house. And so the moon moved from the area of the 5th house, which is the joy and passion, optimism and play, into the 6th house of the actual routines and habits and getting down to business of being, adulting essentially. And doing the work that needs to be done on oneself to really bring ourselves into alignment with our highest version, the 6th house. With Aries, there seems to be the anchor and then also the resources and the big picture perspective, right? The long view is in the larger social order, and the reality is in the larger social order as well. And so strangely enough, for Aries to be focusing on their own creative passion expression, and then even coming into an awareness about what they need to do on the daily and feeling into the need for that was really strong, as opposed to the meaning of it at a collective level. So we have the moon squaring the sun. So the energetic hygiene in its most in the house that it's really meant to be practiced is for Aries is in Virgo in the 6th house, and then the sun in Sagittarius is in in the ninth house for Aries people. So it's all kind of corresponding to their most powerful positions anyway. So Aries people, a lot of the focus up here on the big picture, right? The overall truth and the belief system, whereas the moon passing through the fifth and sixth house over the weekend was just pulling Aries back into a feeling of like, well, who am I and what am I going to do about it? Essentially, who am I and what am I going to do about it? In a square to what does it all mean, right? What does it all mean? So Neptune is in the 12th house. And so, it's going to dissolve a lot of the boundaries that, there are already so few boundaries there. It's just going to get even more foggier in terms of the spiritual collective and the realm of dreams and fantasy and imagination for Aries. But it also is going to make Neptune in this area more powerful, which will almost force, in some ways, for Aries, it'll just make that which is already very diffused so much more. And in the outside world, it's been a lot of inner diffusion in the spiritual experience for Aries, and it's soon going to be a lot of fog for Aries in the astral realm, I think. So having your anchors and your best advocate over here in the 11th house Aries, showing you where you can really if you get lost, you can go back here, which is in more of the collective human order and using the mind, right? Because, again, what you believe is really going to be, and what's the big picture and what you believe and the meaning of it all is what's going to be eclipsed by the time we get to the solar eclipse on the 4th. So with Mars in the 8th house like this, Aries, the disobeying those orders, obeying one's own conscience in terms of what you want to, the power and of relationships and what you actually want to get out of, what do you want to produce, and knowing what is right and what is wrong in the 8th house and going into that realm is really going to help you when this whole area becomes like one big cloud, right, in the astral. Being able to go deeply into the depth and know what's right and what's not at a level that's even in the subconscious is going to be what will allow Aries people to not drown in the ocean of consciousness, right? Knowing and being very, very clear and very forceful almost about what is right and what is wrong, and being the hero with integrity in the 8th house. It can go either way with Mars here. Because, again, the meaning of it all is about to change for Aries people. And the wounding of self is so very strong for Aries people. So it seems like feeling into one's joy and passion and then being very sensitive to what you're going to do about it was a big theme of the weekend. So Saturn sextile Chiron. So when you're feeling this wounding of self, Aries, and you're not sure who you even are, and every time you try to look at a full picture of who you could be or who you really are, something triggers you and pulls you off of that focus of who you are. When that happens, I think that, again, going back to the container of the collective in general, going to find support from people, or just finding an anchor in the energy of the collective, I think is really going to assist Aries people. Now, and really getting to the heart of what things mean, like really addressing it, and allowing oneself to feel the sting without being overcome by it. This also is going to allow for a purification of the self that Aries really could stand to have right now. So that when the eclipse happens in this ninth house, and the things that need to be purged out of the belief system are initiated in the eclipse cycle, at least beforehand, there is an opportunity to let go of, or just not really identify anymore with that version of ourselves that feels guilt or shame for who we are. And Aries is all about who they are, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's where it all begins, is the spark of life. So, but here's the fire of Sagittarius, which is the meaning, right? And when that goes out, we're in trouble. And I'm not suggesting that it will. What I'm saying is that it'll burn, and we can't assume that if it burns that we won't actually rise from the ashes. And for Aries, it's going to be very much a part of who you are. So yeah, Aries, that's pretty much it in a nutshell, right? So we're going to move on to Taurus. Okay. Oh, Taurus, man, the Taurus people are really going to have an interesting time when the nodes shift, because it's going to be all in their first house, Taurus, when the nodes shift to Taurus and Scorpio, 1st and 7th house. So Taurus is really going to be leading the way karmically for all of us, and showing us by example what it means to be a Taurus. All right, Taurus. So we're going to, as we said, the eclipse was along the 7th and 1st house. So Taurus people are really going through, there's not a lot of stability of identity. And in fact, Aries might be having the wounded healer narrative be brought up in their face in terms of who they are. But for Taurus, it's really just a lack of stability in general that is allowing for Taurus in some ways to actually transcend themselves. It's just a little difficult with the full moon being eclipsed, not seeing what parts of themselves are ready to be released. But with Uranus here in Taurus, it's especially retrograde, like the aspects of identity are really, the lack of stability is allowing now for the perusal of all different kinds of options. And I think that Taurus people, this is a great, it's hard because Taurus people are very embedded and entrenched in who they are, and their personality is so stable and value oriented and resource oriented and very connected to the earth itself. And so but also very stable individuals. So when they're in relationship, they get so intense. And so this is where Mars is right now, and the Sagittarian elements with Sun and Mercury and Ketu all in the 8th house for Taurus. And so there's a lot of attention right now paid on and felt and acted on in terms of interpersonal relationships, and also too what you're producing in those relationships, and not so much. And there's less stability and focus on who Taurus people actually are, because it's still being changed as a result of Uranus to awaken into the next iteration. So let's look at where everything is. So Chiron in the 12th house. So we know that Taurus is dealing with these victim savior types of narratives, and the wounded healer in past lives, the morphogenetic field, in the collective unconscious, right? So these wounds are really expressing themselves. The collective's wounds, I think, are really coming through for Taurus and being experienced as like, I need to do something about this, or I feel feeling guilty about who you are in a past life, maybe, or, feeling guilty about having an identity at all in the context of the whole, because Taurus, again, is very much related to the Pleiadians, because that's where the Pleiades star cluster is. And it's just about being in communion with what is. And so I think, but being able to attach to the spark or initiate the spark of life in a spiritual way for Taurus is really important. And for Chiron here, I think that, quite honestly, Taurus people are just having a hard time keeping it lit, right? Because maybe something blows it out every time they try to spark themselves in the spiritual realm or in fantasy or imagination. So And in the meantime, being able to settle on any aspect of identity has been a real challenge for Taurus, just in the, all the years leading up to or all the years that Uranus has been in Taurus. So, but what is getting a lot of attention for Taurus people is certainly who they are in their relationships and what they are producing as a result of their communion, which will all have some focus here on the other end in terms of the collective unconscious. So maybe there is something that needs to be addressed in terms of what we produce together that will really have an impact on clearing up whatever this karmic wounded identity really is. And I do feel like that Taurus people are going to have to get very real with themselves about what they're producing in their relationships, who they are in their relationships, realizing how much power they have in their relationships, and being able to hold the sting of the scorpion in those connections with Antares and the meaning of it, and be able to apply that to healing some multi-generational wounds perhaps, or just getting out from under an identity that's, about something that has happened on some other, in the collective unconscious, I think is really coming through the most for Taurus. And so it'll be in the 8th house for Taurus where this eclipse really happens. So the moon was moving through the 4th house and the 5th house over the weekend for Taurus. So you had the moon in one's personal and inner life, home and family and intimacy, and then into the 5th house about where they are feeling the most joy and creative expression. Of course, it's Virgo. It's an earth sign. So I feel like Taurus really wanted to express themselves in terms of their inner life and their home and family, and was really finding a sensitivity to their own expression through their own energetic process and their own energetic hygiene, and being able to have an objective approach to the life force within them so that they can really feel grounded and rooted and stable. And I think that what potentially, especially with the moon in a square to the sun over here in the 8th house, is that a lot of the attention was getting paid on how we all have to work together in this realm of what we're producing in our communion. But Taurus, the moon was making it very personal in terms of like getting your, being able to master your own energy as part of your own creative expression. And when you're really thinking about and focusing on like the areas of power in your relationships, sometimes it's difficult to think about your own position within those things. And I think the moon in Virgo for Taurus really was a very potentially uncomfortable moment of like, well, I have to actually not fall into, I have to actually be meticulous about and very disciplined in some ways about the life force that moves through me, and be masterful, because it actually does have an impact on what the power dynamics are in my relationships. And that's coming up a lot too with Mars in your 7th house. There's a lot of power dynamics in relationships for Taurus that are going to be brought to the surface and the awareness, and going to be part of the cycle that unfolds over the next 6 months. So the last couple of days may have been a little bit uncomfortable in terms of feeling into these realms that have to do with the personal character and how you express, and the quality of how you express yourself versus what is created through your power dynamics. So the thing about Taurus is you also have Jupiter and Saturn in your 10th house. Wow. So it's really giving, you're really kind of like in boss mode in 2 different realms in your public life right now, Taurus. And so the sextile to Chiron is showing the potential investment that can be made between Saturn, just like a power, like political power, Saturn in the 10th house. You kind of just have to step into your responsibility, Taurus, and that will in some ways allow you to kind of address the Chiron in the 12th house, which is some very distinct wounding of self, a karmic wounding that needs to really be addressed if it hasn't already. But there's something about just stepping into your responsibility in your public or professional life, and for you to start acting out the vision in your, whatever your career is or what you may be contributing to, your mission, right? Your mission. So that was the first opportunity. And this is still in a sextile, these two. So Taurus, what we're going to find then, like I said, is the 8th house energy with Mercury, the sun meeting each other, and then each of them in a trine over here to the 12th house is, again, it's about the power dynamics in your relationships. I don't know how much more simply to put it. That's going to be the focus of this next eclipse. And also, too, when the sun and Mercury meet Antares in the 8th house, the heart of the Scorpion in the Scorpionic house is going to really help purify and burn away some multiple lifetimes, possibly multiple multidimensional experiences of a wound of self. It's time to let it go, but part of that is going to be realizing just how powerful these relationships actually are. And Taurus people have a tendency to be very intense. And so the 11th house is where we find Neptune, Taurus. And so this is the area where Neptune goes direct in the realm of your larger social network. So Taurus, what you're going to find here is that it's going to get a lot more nebulous about who your social network really is. And it's going to you have this one last chance to really assert yourself in your interpersonal relationships and who you are and what's important to you, so that when Neptune does station direct in the 11th house and that all starts to just dissolve, you know who you are, and you've asserted yourself in your relationships, so that when this seems like there's nothing to hold on to in this particular realm, you at least know who you are in the one-on-one and the relationships that matter to you. And that's going to be really important. I feel like that Taurus is about to go into a very difficult underworld journey in terms of their power dynamics, and what they're capable of creating with other people if they stick to their integrity in terms of who they are and what is important and has meaning to them. But it also is going to be a big healing opportunity at a karmic level for Taurus. So we'll move on to good old Gemini. All right. Gemini, this is where Black Moon Lilith is right now, is in Gemini. And this is where the North Node is. And so the Geminis have been really holding it down in terms of who they are, really leading the way in terms of where we're all evolving at a soul level, because that is what Rahu truly stands for. So you're going to see, the North Node sitting right, in your first house, Gemini. So that means that the 6th and 12th house, again, were the eclipse, but now the opposite of Sagittarius. So the eclipsed moon and Uranus, Gemini is experiencing a lot of turbulence in their spiritual life and the collective unconscious in general. Not real. That certainly is not too far of a stretch to realize. And also, too, that what each Gemini on a personal level is meant to really release in order to mature within the spiritual realm is also a little bit elusive because of the eclipse. Then the moon Mars in the 6th house. I mean, this is a pretty strong, heroic push for Gemini to really recondition themselves and to purify themselves as a result of their action and their consistent action and their devotion and discipline in that realm. So it's really for Gemini, I mean, obviously the next eclipse is really going to be in the realm of their interpersonal relationships and what is developing under the surface when Mercury and the sun come together. That was yesterday. And then they each in turn at Antares trine Chiron, which is up here in the 11th house. So we know Gemini's biggest sticking point in terms of wounded healers within the collective itself. And so it's about the interpersonal relationships for Gemini and who they are in the relationships, what's bubbling under the surface that is like a unconscious things that are starting to burn and to grow, that we don't even know are there until they're starting to really make their way to the surface. The Sun and Mercury and Cazimi definitely made its way to our mental awareness with what's going on down there, and then each of them in turn trine to Chiron. So whatever is the heart of the Scorpion for us, well, as Gemini, the heart of the Scorpion in terms of who you are in your relationships is going to have a direct impact and healing opportunity in terms of who you are in the collective. One second. Okay, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Right, here we go. Gemini. So yeah, Gemini, it's the elongated process is going to be in the seventh house, in your interpersonal relationships. Saturn and Jupiter in your house of belief systems, right? So Gemini, that's where you can find your anchor right now, and also too a lot of your best advocate. As long as, and Jupiter loves the ninth house, Gemini, so is really in all his glory in your ninth house. So your belief systems, Gemini, is really where you're going to find I think, the most stability and the most resources, because your career, your mission, it's about to start getting a lot foggier again, right? But it's the work that you have committed to doing on yourself and really, and obeying your own conscience about what that means, that is really going to find some traction with Neptune, that then is going to make your whole career area, your mission, much more dissolved and diffused. It will be more powerful, but it also will be a lot foggier potentially. And so knowing what you're here to do for yourself is going to really assist in that process when Neptune stations direct. So Gemini, it's a lot about your interpersonal relationships. It's going to be activated with the eclipse and Taurus to Chiron, because that's going to have a direct impact on you resolving these wounded healer and savior complex or victim complex in the larger social context as a whole. You realize how much you create that situation in your interpersonal relationships. And the heart of the Scorpion is not going to be easy for Gemini to interface with, but then also will release you from that narrative of being a victim or having to be a savior in your social networks, right? You can just let it go, Gemini, and just be yourself, because honestly, that has been a big part of your identity in terms of where we're all being pulled in order to learn. Geminis have been the gold standard of where we're heading in terms of our evolution as a whole. So that means that your belief systems that are rooted in the ninth house, which can be either so rooted or so crystallized that nothing new can actually come forward, but also too, Saturn in the ninth house is really like, no, I need to make sure that this is fully formed ideas before I commit to giving them meaning. And so this is the first thing that's going to allow for at least to alchemize or transmute in some ways the wounded healer aspect in the 11th house. And then that's going to be the anchor. And so when you get to much more of the right on the surface awareness and the very visceral experience of getting right to the heart of the deep aspects of meaning here, it's really the meaning in the relationships. And with the eclipse for Gemini, it's going to be that which can't come with you in the next cycle that is going to be purged out over the next few months in terms of the way you interact in your immediate relationships. Big change in how you are in your relationships, Gemini. And that's going to release a lot of, I think, this attachment to an old identity in the larger context that you're finally ready. I think that you're finally ready to let go of, Gemini. So, and then we're going to move on to Cancer. and then Leo, and then we will be done. Oh my gosh. No wonder my voice is kind of having an issue here. That's okay though. I don't mind. This is like my joy right here. It's true. So I don't mind. And it also gives people a really good, shows people exactly how I would read for them too. All right, Cancers. Okay, so, the lunar eclipse, again, 5th and 11th house, with Uranus in the 11th house. So Cancer people are noticing that their social networks are not very stable, and what needs to be released within themselves, and how they feel about the social organism as a whole. I think Cancer people are really, that was not made clear very much either. What is clear though, and what is very strong for the Cancer person, is that your creative passion and joy, and then also too how to actually put that to a routine that will build into something real. That is where a Cancerian energy is right now. So Chiron is in Cancer's 10th house of career. So I think that Cancer people, being that they are experiencing a Pluto transit of their 7th house, and a real powerful transformation of who they are in their relationships, I can see that the 10th house, the Chiron aspect of this too feeds right into it. And this was, when Venus was in a square to Chiron not that long ago, I think that became really clear to the Cancer person in terms of the value and how they value relationships in their everyday lives, and the people as well. But with Pluto here for Cancer people, you're finding the slow burn of deep psychological transformation, soul transformation when it comes to who you are in your relationships. And that's because Pluto is having that impact on Capricorn just across the board. So Cancers really do need to, I would say this feels like, learning to be, you're just transforming, right? Your soul is evolving as a result of what's being destroyed in your interpersonal relationships. And Venus is really kind of giving all of us the opportunity to have some wisdom and some grace about what it means to come together and create something substantial. So the career house and the mission is where Cancerian people, I think, are really finding their wounds of self coming out, because, Cancer people want to take care of other people, which is all that 4th house energy. So when you get to the 10th house, you really find your mission and just being yourself. And this is I think Cancer people are really struggling with this in terms of their mission, and they are getting pulled off of their mission by being triggered and into, am I a victim? Am I a savior? What am I here to do? Like, what's my destiny? Like, can I even be myself? Should I be myself? I think Cancerian people are so important right now, and they're really getting pulled off mission because Chiron is here. So you have Neptune in your 9th house, about to go. So belief systems for the Cancerian are about to become so nebulous and watery that they will be, you could really fool yourself or be fooled in terms of what you believe, or not having any idea what you believe. And that's been going on for a little while internally for the Cancerian person. Now it's going to be like everything outside of you is also going to start dissolving into something that is not, mutable fire means that you can stoke that fire whenever you want and start making, start practicing alchemy. With Pisces here, it's just, there is no boundary, and there's no fire, and there's no distinction either. Granted, it's expansive like Sagittarius, it's mutable, but with Neptune here, belief systems for the Cancerian are about to get, real confusing and foggy. What do I believe? So what do I believe? And then also, being triggered into identity wounds and getting pulled off mission. Cancerian people, be ready, okay? So, the energy is in how you express yourself, and then also too with Mercury and the Sun, you know, what is it that you have to actually root out of yourself, specifically in terms of meaning when it comes to the sixth, or Sagittarius in the sixth house. So let's see here. But where you do have a lot of anchorage and advocacy is in what you produce in your relationships. So even though you have Pluto and Venus, Venus in Capricorn is a good thing for the Cancerian, I think, because it's giving, you know, the Cancerian person an opportunity to, like I said, find some grace and some wisdom and some maturity in some ways in terms of who they are in their relationships, and value to it as well. Just because it's changing doesn't mean there's no value and that there aren't aspects that are valuable in your relationships. And it's really in what you produce in those relationships, the power of your communion and cooperation with people, that is really powerful. And of course, as a Cancerian, that makes a lot of sense. So really find your strength and your stability here in this zone that not many people are really able to maximize. And your eighth house is Aquarius, Cancer. So it also really suggests that there is a certain amount of mental genius and mastery of these very deep watery realms, because you as a person exhibit the qualities of being capable of being rooted to the core of who you are. And protection. So, which will be great when it comes to Neptune in their ninth house of the big picture becoming so big that you don't even know that that's a picture anymore. And you can really delude yourself with Neptune in your ninth house like that. So when the Saturn in a sextile to Chiron, right? Again, it's about what you produce in your relationships, that really is like an anchor right now. And it allows an investment into, again, healing this wound to get you back on mission. And then Mercury, the moon in Virgo was in a square to the sun, right? And so the moon, especially in Leo and Virgo, right? The second and third house, really feeling into your resources, feeling into and having a really keen observation beyond just your mind, but in the mental realm, in your immediate environment. And this has a lot to do with the sensitivity that you have, especially because the moon's your chart ruler, to your immediate environment, and to be meticulous about it, right? To be very clear with yourself, who's around you, the quality of your quality of yourself in your immediate environment. Do you have the capacity to know the difference between yourself and others in your immediate environment, and your communication, your mental sphere, right? Are you sure that your thoughts are your own, Cancer? I think that that's something to consider here. And that was considered, because in a square to all of the sun that's over in the sixth house, it's like, okay, it's time for me to start breaking myself down and doing this work on myself and like really getting it together. And this square, this moment, I think for Cancers was really, really important, because it gave you a sense of where you ended and where others began in terms of your mental sphere and your immediate environment and the people that you interact with and on a daily basis. Because it's going to be challenging enough to have a sixth house eclipse in Sagittarius like this, and then to have also the Sun and Mercury together. I mean, you're really getting a sense of like all of the potential of what you could create yourself to be. It's going to be elongated. I keep saying drag, and it's not the right word. Elongated out for the next 6 months. And in order to get back on mission, you're really going to have to purify out of your own body, right? And the meaning of the work that you do on yourself as well is going to have to go. And surrendering to yourself and that work. So the Cancerian, I think that knowing who, like your passion and your joy, knowing your voice and really firmly sticking to that and acting on it, before your belief system, the belief system you've been operating under as a whole, starts to be so formless that you don't even know what you believe anymore. This is going to be important. And the process, I think, Cancer, this is really about the process and the action you take in terms of the higher mind, and understanding yourself is a big part of this whole complex here of Sagittarius and the eclipse, and trine Chiron, right? There are things in your own template energetically that are going to, and how, what that all means for you, that's going to, it's going to take a while for that to really unfold, just like with everything else with this solar eclipse and this whole eclipse season. And again, who you are versus how you feel about the collective you're part of is where the first eclipse was. And so there's something about getting back on mission for Cancer and Cancerian people with Chiron here that is going to be brought about by a very serious and a very committed journey into the meaning of who and what you are. And specifically what kind of work specifically, again, it's the work that we do on ourselves that has the meaning when it comes to our relationship. And so this is going to be, oh, Cancer. It's going to, it's going to take a while for Cancerian people to really initiate this purge. They're just going to have to be patient. But what can be released on some level, I think, is what's keeping you off mission, and that'll be getting to the heart of something in terms of this sixth house. So you may find that you've been avoiding something, right? Or avoiding a work, or avoiding a new routine that needs to be brought into practice, avoiding putting a new practice into place, just avoiding doing any work on yourself. And maybe it's not even about yourself anymore, Cancer. Maybe it is about your role within the collective, but that's not easy to see. So the only thing that you can really work with is what you do know, which seems to be, how to voice yourself, and how you can take that voice and put it into, and the expression of your voice, and how to put it into a form that allows you to grow in and evolve into the best version of yourself. And until you do that, I mean, that needs to happen well before you can start initiating a new person when you're in your relationships. But I do feel that one of the things that's sticking out the most for Cancer and people right now is the fact that they're being pulled off mission by old identities that are really very strong about who you are, what you're here to do, and who you are within the context of your contribution to society. So it'll come through the work on the self, or some sort of crisis that is brought to the surface in the next day or so, that will allow a release of, and a healing in some ways, of what this has been holding you back from. So finally, I knew it was going to still be a 2.5 hour stream, but the good news is that you can you can jump around and come back to it or whatever, to see how things reference your chart. So finally, we're going to look at Leo. The sun, right? Leo is ruled by the sun. Leo is our voice. It's us being the shining version of who, the fullest devotional version of who we are. So Leo, we know that the full moon lunar eclipse is, look at that, along, again, your 4th and 10th house. So you can also look at a lot of these and know that everything is interconnected with their opposition. So just like Aquarius was along the same axis but opposite, we have Leo in the 4th and 10th house. And so for Leos, you find the lack of stability and certainly the lack of full clarity or reflection is in the house of career and destiny and mission. So Leo, there's just not a lot of stability. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of turbulence here. There's a sense of not knowing exactly what it is we have to release in order to mature, and that there are a lot of options presenting themselves to us that we are internally gazing at. It's like window shopping timelines, or window shopping, for Leo at least, window shopping, directions or ways to express our mission, right? But what is bright and forceful and intense and dynamic is the inner life, and also self-expression from an individual perspective. The 5th house, right? Our joy and our optimism and our creative voice, and where's our passion? That's the 5th house. So Leo, this eclipse that's coming up is going to be a big, is really going to set in motion something that needs to burn away when it comes to what used to be your passion. These things can change all the time. And for Leo, you find that you have a Sagittarian 5th house. And so understanding, synthesizing information, operating at a higher mind is what really gets you going, right? It's using the fire to actually find, as meaning when you are a Leo person, because you in fact are the center of the universe when you're a Leo. So where do we find Jupiter and Saturn? Well, it's in the 7th house. So Leo, there's also a lot of your stability and your representation here of resources and big picture, big ideas here is in your 7th house of your interpersonal relationships. So really find your strength here in your interpersonal relationships, Leo, because when you are a Leo rising, that means you are an Aquarius in your relationships. And sometimes that can seem like you are a robot, but at other times it means that you are so capable of just like being the conduit for the relationship as a whole, that you really can be a really strong presence for people in your relationships, especially depending on who it is and what their chart looks like. But this is your strength right now, Leo, is in your relationships. So I would recommend that you kind of really lean into that, because what do we find here? So Neptune is going to station direct in your 8th house. And so Leo having this like amorphous, endless field of consciousness as what is produced in their relationships is about to get even wider and more vast and more malleable than it ever has been. And so strangely enough, I feel like that with Leo, there's about to be like this really amplified experience of sharing everything, and even sharing everything that is outside of us now in terms of what we produce in our relationships. That is, it'll be like you can access anything here. And in fact, it will become, what you share will be something that is much more of a idealistic nature than it ever has been. And also very spiritual, very transcendent, very imaginative. I like this for Leo. Now, Chiron is in that 9th house of belief systems. So this is really where Leos, I think, have been struggling a lot in terms of who they are and what they believe and who they are in reference to what they believe. I think that this has been a real struggle. So Saturn in the 7th house in a sextile to here, it's who Leos are in their relationships, which is a very stable, very almost paternal, certainly very anchored individual in, and somebody who is ready to step into action and leadership in some ways. The Leo people really right now can actually step forward and find themselves, or at least some sort of strength here in who they are in their relationships. And then with Saturn in a sextile to Chiron is so the belief systems that we're operating, and the meaning of our relationships, and how they are so powerful that they can actually synthesize new creations, right? Whatever that is, the meaning is what really initiates us to perform the alchemy. This seems to be where Leos are really getting pulled, back into their wounding of self, is in terms of the big picture. Because they want to just be themselves, and there's something here that keeps pulling us into different wounded identities rather than staying focused on the full nature of who we could be. Well, it's in standing in this kind of like responsible, almost dad-like position in your seventh house that is going to, I think, what has allowed for a transmutation of what is much more of like an inner child wound in terms of the big. That is very fascinating, actually. Now that I'm saying it out loud, it's like Leos, by stepping into like this dad role in terms of your interpersonal relationships, it's going to allow for like you to speak to your own inner child that is kind of like, I don't even know what I believe anymore. Like none of this actually is real, or whatever, right? Or if I'm not this identity, who am I? So Leos are able to, and this interpersonal relationship can be with different parts of yourself too. That's something to consider as well. So Leo can really stand to find a sense of authority and strength in their interpersonal relationships that will allow for this inner wounding, this inner child wounding in terms of, the belief system. Because this is where we really learn to believe, is in, what we're told is the truth. And so when that is, when we're struggling to find our identity within that, Leos can find their like paternal or groundedness or a sense of responsibility and authority just in their relationships in general. And I think even a relationship to themselves will allow for a very honest assessment of this. So when we find then that the Sun and Mercury in the fifth house meet Antares in terms of, this is the Leo house, is the fifth house of what it is that's at the heart of the issue here that we really can just make or break us. And for Leo, it's going to be in terms of who am I as a person? And when that happens, again, there is a resolution in some ways, or an opportunity to resolve, or at the very least, purify those parts of ourselves that for Leo, again, is this inner child that is just struggling to identify themselves with a belief system that maybe is turning out not to be what was believed in the first place. So, or what Leo believes about themselves in relation to the paradigm. So it's going to have a lot to do with how the Leo person finds their joy and their passion, which again is about utilizing the higher mind, synthesizing, creation, alchemy. The Leo person really finds their joy in actual spiritual alchemy or mental alchemy, right? Thinking about things, coming up with new ideas. So coming to the surface for sure, and then getting right to the heart of it, which I think will allow for the Leo person to drop those identities, or at least drop the need to fit into a victim or savior complex when it comes to the belief systems that maybe don't have the same meaning to us anymore. So that's the fifth house is going to be the house for the Leo person of the solar eclipse. So what needs to be purified away in terms of the Leo person's expression and how they find their joy and their passion and the meaning that they're finding for themselves in and finding meaning is a big part of the joy for a Leo person. That's going to that process that's very natural to the Leo person is going to go through a metamorphosis over the next couple of months that will include, I think ultimately will be a big release for Leo people in their belief systems, because it's going to be as if the Leo person, if they can actually align themselves with the process of the alchemy in and of itself, and what is brewing under the surface, and also to what needs to be released in order to move into the next cycle purified. I think that it's going to be the Leo people just like being themselves, to be perfectly honest, and letting themselves be themselves, which is going to have such an impact, not on just them, but on everybody, because we're talking about belief systems, talking about career and mission, and those are the big ones, especially because the North Node will move into the Leo's 10th house as well. So the karmic trajectory of all of us at a soul level is going to be in the area of the mission for the Leo people. And so, clearing out a lot of gunk and garbage and burning it away. I mean, it's really going to be burning it away. And the Leo person is so good at that, because if they just shine really brightly, they will just, by virtue of being themselves, burn everything away. And that's going to really help resolve a lot right here. So the Mars in the 4th house for the Leos in the trine to Neptune right now is it can be confrontational with Mars in the 4th house. You can find yourself getting into arguments with your family, or getting into really intense emotional confrontations, and really advocating for yourself in the context of the very tight-knit family group, for instance, or the heritage that you found yourself in. But so Leo people, if they're willing to challenge what they have grown up within, and challenge it when they realize that that is not something they can align themselves with anymore in their family, in where they have gathered their personal power previously, in their intimate container of a family or a tribe or a clan. If they are able to really stand in their power in that hero mode, when Neptune does station direct in the 8th house, and we don't know which way is Leos especially don't know which way is up or sideways in terms of the darkness, they are going to be able to, as long as they're sticking to their convictions when it comes to the family and where they belong, and maybe even identifying that for sure this is where they belong, then this realm is going to become nothing more than an opportunity to make whatever we want, especially the Leo person in the 8th house. Neptune stationing direct. Now, it will be foggy. The fog of war is about to happen with Neptune stationed direct. It is about to get so foggy and so cloudy, and like we're all going to be dealing with this, but the Leo person is going to have these experiences in the deep, deep waters. And so having conviction about where they belong is going to allow for them to trust what we're producing together, and what they are producing in the relationships. And again, it's the interpersonal relationships and the dynamics that the Leo person is going to find their strength in. And that may mean having to be confrontational in your family situation or in your personal life somehow, and really standing by your convictions, because it's really in the expression of meaning and coming to awareness and understanding that the Leo person really gets their value and how they express themselves. So that's going to be changing for the Leo person, but ultimately it's going to be changing in a way, I think, that is going to allow for this inner child wounding of belief systems to be resolved just by being themselves. So, wow, that was pretty intense. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. My God, I can't even imagine if anybody stuck around for the whole stream, because that's pretty long. But you have the option now of being able to find your sign and listen to your horoscope. So thank you so much for being here. We'll be back to the regular daily transmissions starting tomorrow. Although I do have to warn you that things might condense or consolidate a little bit because I'm going to have some new responsibilities soon. So we'll see what happens. I might just have to move things around. So if you are interested in a reading, or if you're interested in energy work to support your process, you can book through catalystenergies.net. That's in the description box below. You can support this work through Subscribestar. You can reach out on social media. All of those links are in the description box below. I'm still running the sale for the eclipse season. It's $99. It's a 90-minute recording of your personal chart, and we go through the journey of the eclipse season up until May 2022. So that's still an option. You can email me, or you can book through catalystenergies.net. That's in the description box below, or find me on Facebook or Telegram through Catalyst Energies, and you can reach out and book the reading. So I love you guys. I hope you're having a great Monday back to reality, I guess, or whatever you're doing, just happy Monday. And we will be together tomorrow to start looking at the full range of the daily transmissions, okay? Take care of yourself. Have a great day. God bless you all, and I'll see you